All right, so I get to be the lucky one standing between you and happy hour. Just like Matt, although I am giving this presentation, this is the result of a huge collaborative effort of all of these folks up here on the screen. I particularly want to thank them all this year, given we had 1 week less to crunch all this data, and here we are. So I'm going to do the exact opposite order that Matt did. First, we're going to talk about the fishery performance, then the assessment surveys, then the estimated population size from our modeling, and then the recommended allowable harvest. As a reminder, and for those of you who don't know, for yellow perch, Lake Erie is divided into 4 management units, with MU1 on the west and MU4 on the east. And taking a look at our overall fishery performance. So this first graph is lake-wide harvest. And this is our time series starting in 1975. The lake-wide is this black dotted bar, and then each of the individual colors corresponds to the management unit. Our overall lake-wide harvest in 2023 was about 4.3 million pounds, which was an increase of 27% from 2022. The highest harvest was in Management Unit 1, which accounted for 55% of lake-wide harvest at about 2.4 million pounds, and MU1 harvested 98% of their total allowable catch. 29% of the lake-wide harvest occurred in Management Unit 3, which harvested about 1.2 million pounds, and they, however, only harvested 40% of their total allowable catch. 9% of the lake-wide harvest occurred in Management Unit 4, down here in the purple, and that was relatively similar to last year's catch with an increase of 2%, which was 70% of their total allowable catch. And then finally, 7% of the lake-wide harvest occurred in Management Unit 2, and that was also a slight increase from last year, and 40% of MU2 total allowable catch was harvested with all gears. Taking a look at some individual gears, this is the gillnet harvest by management unit, and then also the lake-wide in the black dash bar. A total of 2.5 million pounds were harvested by gillnets last year, which was an increase of 15% from the previous year. Management Unit 1 had quite a large increase of 32% in the harvest from 2022. In Management Unit 2, about 0.2 million pounds were harvested, which was an 18% increase from last year, and gillnets accounted for 73% of the harvest. However, I do want to point out, if you take a look at the blue, it is very low compared to the time series, and that was the 3rd lowest gillnet harvest in that management unit. For Management Unit 3, there was a very similar harvest to last year, and as well as Management Unit 4, which had an increase of 7%. Taking a look at the sport harvest, again with our lake-wide trend, so the past few years have been lower compared to the long-term time trend, but we are seeing that uptick from our low in 2019. If you take a look here, red, Management Unit 1 is much higher than all the other management units, and 93% of the sport harvest occurred in Management Unit 1. For Management Unit 2, there was a decline from 2022, and that was the 2nd lowest sport harvest in our time series. Sport harvest accounted for only 4% of the total harvest in management, or of lake-wide. In Management Unit 3, we also saw a decline. Last year was the lowest sport harvest in the time series, and sport harvest accounted for less than 1% of total harvest in Management Unit 3. Management Unit 4 did decline, but it's near the average that it has been over the long term, and 14% of total harvest in Management Unit 4 occurred through sport anglers. And finally, taking a look at trap nets. So again, with our lake-wide harvest here, we're starting to rebound similar to levels in the 1990s. There was an increase from 2022 by 34% for not quite 0.8 million pounds. Management Unit 1 accounted for 55% of the trap net harvest in 2023, and so this is a pretty big switch. Previously, Management Unit 2 had the largest trap net harvest, and now Management Unit 1 in the red does. And Management Unit 3 and 4's harvest was very similar to last year. We do see a slightly different age composition in our harvest in each management unit, and this is primarily related to the main gears that are driving this harvest. So we see a lot higher sport harvest in Management Unit 1, and we see primarily age 2 fish being harvested there. For Management Units 2 and 3, we are seeing age 4 being the largest, but also a decent number of age 3s as well. And then for Management Unit 4, age 3 accounted for the largest portion of the catch. Moving on to our assessment surveys by the agencies. And this will be by each individual management unit. Ontario's will be on the left and the state agencies will be on the right. The lighter color bars are the age 2 fish, and the darker colored bars are those fish that are age 3 and older. If you take a look at both the Ontario and Ohio surveys, we did see quite a big increase from 2022 to 2023. However, if you notice, this is primarily age 2 fish that we are seeing and not a lot of age 3 and older fish. For Management Unit 2, there was a slight increase for both Ontario and Ohio in 2023, but if you take a look at the long term, you'll see that these values are very, very low compared to past historical data. In Ohio, the 2023 is the 3rd lowest on record. For Management Unit 3, the catch rate in both jurisdictions remains very, very low compared to the long term. And in Management Unit 4, the Ontario catch had quite a large decline from 2022, and in New York we're seeing relatively stable for the last 4 or 5 years. So then taking all of that data together and crunching our numbers for the models, this is what we get for our estimated population abundance for each management unit. And again, it'll be, the lighter bars will be age 2 and the darker bars are age 3 and older. For Management Unit 1, the projected abundance for 2024 is approximately 60 million fish, and that's down 19% from our previous abundance estimate last year. I want to make sure to point out that last year we projected a lot of age 2s, and this year we're projecting fewer age 2s and a lot more age 3s, and those are more susceptible to all the gears at that larger age 3. For Management Unit 2, we are projecting a total of 44 million fish, which is a decline of 16%. And here again, we're seeing a projection of a lot more older fish with poor recruitment of age 2 coming in. I do also want to point out that this age 3 here is the highest estimated number of age 3 fish in about a decade, but based on our assessment surveys, we do have some concerns that this is an overestimate from the models. For Management Unit 3, we are projecting a total abundance of 57 million perch, which is a decline of 23% from last year. There again are fewer age 2 fish coming in during 2024, and in Management Unit 3, we're projecting a large portion of the population will be age 3 and older. And finally, for Management Unit 4, we're looking at a relatively stable number with a decline of only 3%, and moderate to good recruitment of age 2 fish, so much more even distribution of age 2 and age 3 and older fish in Management Unit 4 compared to the other 3 management units. So that was a lot of numbers and slides thrown at you, so I wanted to do a quick summary. I do want to point out that my headings here and here are incorrect. This should be 2023. So for the 2023 total harvest, the change in management units 2 to 4 was 3% or less, but we saw a huge increase of almost 50% in the harvest in management unit 1. And last year, 65% of the lake-wide total allowable catch was harvested. For our 2023 harvest rates, the trap net and sport harvest rates increased in all management units, but I do want you to remember that the trap net harvest was the lowest or near the lowest that it has been in management units 2 and 3. And we are seeing extremely low sport effort and harvest in those central basin management units. For our 2024 abundance projections, we projected an abundance decline in all management units with the smallest change in management unit 4 and a 16 to 23% decrease in the other 3. We are projecting a low recruitment of H2 fish in management units 1 through 3, and the projection of those larger age 3 plus fish will increase in those management units, giving more fish that are susceptible to all of the gears and harvest types. So taking those projections then and looking at the recommended allowable harvest. Again, similar to what we talked about with walleye, we have a harvest control rule that was developed by the Lake Erie Person Management Advisory Group, and it forms the basis for the yellow perch management plan to keep our perch population safe and self-sustaining. So we take a look at how intensely we can fish the fishery while keeping the population safe, and that is that limit reference point there that Matt also talked about. Similar to walleye, our reference points are the target fishing rate, and for perch, that is a percent of the fishing mortality at maximum sustainable yield, and this is selected to get a sustainable fishing rate. Our limit reference point is the biomass at maximum sustainable yield, and this is considered because harvest can impact recruitment. We also have a risk tolerance or P-star of 0.20, and this is the probability that the spawning stock is near the limit reference point and is used to ensure that our spawning stock biomass after fishing remains above that limit reference point. And then yellow perch also has the 20% TAC constraint from year to year. And these reference points were identified to balance the biological capability of the stocks, looking at productivity and stock size, looking at fishery performance, including harvest rate metrics and stability, and our risk tolerance. And so these are 4 graphs that are showing the P-star or our risk tolerance for each of the management units. The spawning stock biomass is up here on the y-axis. This flat line is our limit reference point, and this is showing the change in the spawning stock biomass through time. Each of these red dots is our projections for 2024 and 2025, and when we're looking at the P-star, we're looking at the error around our 2025 biomass. And so if these error bars approach the limit reference point, then your P-star is going to be higher, and that's when we have the higher risk of reducing our spawning stock biomass below a level that we're comfortable with. So for MUs 1, 3, and 4, our p-value was well below 0.2, but if you take a look over here at MU2, our error bar is very, very close to our limit reference point, and our p-value is 0.11. So for the next slide, I'm going to first talk about these 3 management units where our p-value was very low, and then talk about management 2 where our p-value is a little bit higher. So for 2024, recommended allowable harvest for management unit 1, the mean value is 2.861 million pounds of perch, which would be an 18% increase above last year's TAC. For management unit 3, we're looking at a mean of 2.654, which is a decrease from the 2022 TAC, or 2023 TAC, excuse me. And for management unit 4, we're looking at a recommended allowable harvest of 0.458, which is a 22% decline from last year. Now taking a look at that management unit 2, so if we ignore all of our limit reference points and take a look at what the model output tells us, It gives us a mean RAH of 3.5, which would be a 625% increase from the total allowable catch last year. If you recall, MU2 has been in P-STAR since 2019, so that's 5 years, and our management plan does give us a scenario to follow if we are coming out of P-STAR after several years, and this gives us an assumed recommended allowable harvest based on the target, what would have been the target F in previous years with P-STAR, and that would give us a maximum value of 2.75, which is still a 470% increase, which is a very large jump, particularly considering that we are not seeing a large incoming year class with our survey data in this management unit. In addition, if we take a look at this summary, which is a different way of looking at all of those graphs that I showed you. So this is our percentiles of our data. Red is if this year's value was in the 33rd percent or lower in our time series. Yellow would be it's in the middle third of our time series, and then the green would be it was in the top third of our time series data. So our sport effort, extremely low, 10% or less of the value in our long-term time series. If you recall me talking about the harvest rate, it was much higher last year in 2023, but if you recall, the total harvest was actually some of the lowest that we have seen. All of our survey data, looking at age 1, 2, and 3 and older fish, very low in the time series. But our model is giving us a lot rosier picture than what our survey data is showing us. So we have a concern that with these low percentiles we are seeing for the time series in both our fishery and assessment data is not well reflected in our model estimates. And so for the management unit 2 recommended allowable harvest, we want to make sure that we are considering the uncertainty that we're having in these model estimates, that given the population numbers, there is the potential to be in P-STAR next year or in subsequent years. Our abundance is still very low in MU2 and there's no large incoming year class, and that we want to make sure that we are striving for sustainability of the fishery. And then to wrap this up, this is taking a look at those years that we have been in P-STAR, so since 2019. And then this was the target F. This is how much we had to reduce F to make sure that we were below that risk tolerance. And then this was the original recommended allowable harvest. And then taking into effect our P-STAR rule, what the total allowable catch ended up being. And so you can see it's been hovering around 0.5 million pounds for the last 3 years. So we want to make sure that we are looking at other options to consider to sustain the fishery, and the most conservative approach would be to keep a recommended allowable harvest in MU2 closer to that in the last several years, rather than those large increases of more than 400% that we saw with the previous scenarios. I do want to wrap up by talking about the yellow perch management plan. We are in the last year of its time frame, and we did start a review of that last year. Some of the main things that we are looking at is evaluating the assessment model and the harvest control rules. We have begun discussions with the Michigan State Quantitative Fisheries Center, and one of their main recommendations so far is to move modeling to a new, more user-friendly software platform that is going to be more sustainable and hopefully not go away in the future. So, similar to yellow perch, if it's not up yet, the yellow perch task group report will be up on the Great Lakes Fishery Commission website very soon. There are copies of our executive summary out on the table if you do want to grab one of those. And with that, if there's time for questions, I can hopefully answer some. Thank you.